I happen to be at a family gathering, and one of my relatives tells me that they're taking calcium and vitamin D, right? And they're basing it off of a pretty good recommendation, as you would think. But what I want to be very clear about is that some of the information in medicine, I'm sorry, it's just wrong. And it's outdated and it's not right. And so, what I want to do is be very clear with you that oftentimes doctors are giving you information that's old and out of date. And so, what I want you to start doing is challenging them a little bit and having resources that you can challenge them with, right? You don't want to be the relative at the table that's like, yeah, well, I saw some doctor on YouTube and she was saying blah, blah, blah. They're going to stop listening to you. But if you come with your own data from a clinical trial or a study, then you will be the champion at the table. And I want you to be the champion because as much school as I've been through, and as much as I consistently try to improve my education on this piece, family members still going to think that I'm the crazy younger sister, right? So I want you to have a better outcome when you're presenting this information to them. And so just to be clear, when we look at this, so if you look at up to date here, it basically says that, if you have osteoporosis, you should be taking 1,200 milligrams of calcium and 800 milligrams of vitamin D. And as a person of color, as a Black woman, I know that we have our families on vitamin D. It just is. I've been looking at vitamin D levels since I even started in medicine, since before I'm as smart as I am now. And vitamin D is amazing, but vitamin D without magnesium, and added calcium is a ticking time bomb. And you get calcium from your Tums. You get calcium from your multivitamin. Some people are actually even taking a calcium supplement. And so what I want to do is we will talk about how all of that can potentially be a deadly combination for some of us. And instead of it being something that anyone could ever tell you about, it will come up as being like, oh, well, they're Black, they don't eat right, so they had heart disease or heart attack. That's why sometimes you hear about people who maybe seemed really healthy on the outside and everything, they're eating right, they're doing all these, they're taking all these vitamins, and maybe they dropped dead. Maybe they had a stroke. Maybe they had a heart attack. What are some of the potential things that they could have been doing that they thought they were doing right, that in actuality they were doing wrong? And I think it's important that I continue to bring this type of information to you, because not only is it going to affect and impact erectile function, but it will impact your heart. So it doesn't do us any good if we get the dick working and then you have a heart attack on me. I've been really excited to share this with you because it just really touched me when I heard it, because I know that my family member may not listen to me, but you guys might. And what I really want you to do with anything that you hear from me or anywhere else, I want you to do a little research on it and feel it out. So when we think about heart disease and heart attack and erectile dysfunction, and we talk about blood flow, what I want you to start thinking more about is vascular disease, blood vessel disease. And ultimately, what happens naturally over time, whether we want it to or not, our blood vessels actually start to age. And as they start to age, they actually start to lose elasticity. So when the elasticity of our blood vessels actually starts to decrease, what happens in replacement is that it actually starts to stiffen the arteries. And so what I want you to think about, and I've been kind of drawing this out, trying to figure out how is the best way to demonstrate this to you so that you can actually talk about it and know about it. I want you to think about it in terms of, so take a look at this blood vessel that I drew here. So this blood vessel up top really represents, like if you look at these little red areas at the bottom, this represents the lining or the endothelium of the blood vessels, right? So what we really want these smooth muscle cells to kind of be elastic and not stiff. So unfortunately, what happens just naturally as we age, and what can be accelerated based off of lifestyle and diet and things like that, is that this bottom endothelial layer actually can start to become replaced by kind of like bony tissue, like hardened tissue. And unfortunately, what we thought we were doing when we were taking vitamin D and calcium together, um, to make our bones stronger, is in actuality going to deposit bone-like substances into the endothelium, or the lining of the blood vessel, so that we actually move from something that looks like this to something that looks like this. So if you notice the decreased blood flow and the constriction of the arteries. Because if you remember when we were talking about even blood pressure, one of the things about blood pressure is that, as you start to age, or as your blood vessels start to catch some type of disease or become diseased, or become to the point where they're not functioning like they should, because your nitric oxide levels aren't causing it to expand like you want it to, or because the arteries have gotten so stiff they're not expanding like you want it to. What happens over time is that naturally happens, and then what we're doing is the calcium, which is supposed to stay outside of the cell, the calcium and the phosphate together, that are kind of these electrolytes that are floating around in our system, that are, the phosphate is released from our bones, they actually are going to combine and form a calcium and phosphate substance that then causes stiffening of the blood vessels. And unfortunately, when this calcium and phosphate comes together to form a calcium and phosphate bond, they take and put bone-like deposits into the lining of the blood vessels, so that now the blood vessels actually start to become stiff and hardened. And we call that vascular calcification. So the thing that I want to be really clear about is that it is very old school information to tell patients to take vitamin D and calcium. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors haven't gotten the memo. And then unfortunately, some of the multivitamins that you may buy might have it in there. And particularly as a person of color, vitamin D becomes one of those things, right? We're on vitamin D because you want to keep your vitamin D levels elevated. But if you have higher levels of calcium, either because you're taking Tums, did you know that Tums is basically calcium? So if you're taking Tums on a regular basis and maybe some vitamin D on a regular basis, you are potentially setting yourself up to stiffen and harden your arteries at an exponential rate, right? So stiff blood vessels are associated with, so vascular calcification is associated with hypertension, heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, circulation problems, and blood clots. Show me, if you happen to be a black person, show me a person of color who doesn't have a family member that has had one of those things, right? So with that being the case, you don't want to be on anything that can potentially worsen your risk of developing that. So what I want you to start doing is thinking about, what exactly are you taking and what are you taking it for? Every supplement, every vitamin that you take should be taken with intent, and it should be taken with purpose, because unfortunately, this is a fine-tuned balance. This is a machine that God created to be in a balanced state. And if you're throwing the balance off by putting on vitamins and supplements that your body does not need, but not only does not need, but cannot handle, that is when we make disease. That is when we make things worse, right? So I want you to think about it like this. Are you taking Tums? There's a bunch of calcium in it. And are you taking a potential medication that could be increasing calcium? Right? And if you're doing that and you're taking vitamin D on top of it, this is a ticking time bomb, because what vitamin D does is vitamin D helps just open up the channels and escort that calcium and phosphate combination right into the lining of the blood vessel. And it is deadly. I am not the type of doctor that makes a whole lot of energy just trying to scare you, because that's not who I am. I feel like everybody's different, and there's no need to be scared. There's no bit of alarm. Even when there's an emergency situation, I handle it in a slow, meticulous fashion, because I know that if we panic, all hell breaks loose. But I do want to know that you have to be in an extremely cautious state if you are taking anything that elevates your calcium, and on top of that, some vitamin D. Or if you happen to have elevated calcium in your body for whatever reason, and you're taking vitamin D on top of it, because that vitamin D will escort that calcium as it forms a crystal right into the blood vessels and create stiffened arteries. So another thing, when you're taking a vitamin or a multivitamin that has calcium in it, and you're taking vitamin D, you've got to add magnesium into the mix. Magnesium is a natural calcium channel blocker, and it can help reduce the stiffness or the calcifications that can accumulate into the blood vessel that makes them stiff. So, if you notice, there's been a couple high-profile African Americans that have either died or had a stroke recently, and loved ones will say, listen, this is a very healthy person. They exercise, they watched what they ate, and so on and so forth. So, which cues you in on the fact that there's way more to this than just diet and exercise, right? You've got to take into consideration, what are the electrolytes doing? What are the minerals doing in my body? And are they serving me properly? And one of the things that I think that the majority of us could use more of is magnesium. And you've got to add magnesium into the mix if you're taking calcium and vitamin D together. As a matter of fact, vitamin D without magnesium can't really work. And what it will do instead is it will sit around in your body and find other things to do other than what it should be doing. And that's ultimately part of the problem. We throw these vitamins and these supplements into your body thinking, well, if I get more of it, I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to be better. But what you're not taking into consideration, that everything that comes into the body needs to be used. And if it's not used, it needs to be removed from the body. And so if you're putting some stuff in there that the body doesn't know what to do with, or it already has too much of it, it can create pathological situations. And calcium is a perfect example of something that the doctors are telling you to take that you should absolutely not take. Ask any functional medicine doctor, any holistic doctor in the world. Ask them, do you put any of your patients on calcium? And we'll all tell you no, because it has been very clear since the 90s that calcium and vitamin D together can be a ticking time bomb for everybody. So they say, like these recommendations are always like 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of calcium, but calcium with low magnesium will calcify your blood vessels. So you want hard bones, but you don't want hard blood vessels. Hard blood vessels, stiffened arteries will lead to stroke, heart attack, blood clots eventually. It just is. That's what cardiovascular disease really is. So it is a deadly combination to combine vitamin D and calcium together without having enough magnesium on board. Now keep in mind that 2/3 of us aren't getting enough magnesium from our diet on a daily basis. Magnesium isn't in the vegetables like they used to be. Magnesium is really hard to find. So if you have to ask me, Doc, what supplements do you make sure that everybody around you is taking? It's magnesium. Unless, of course, they have kidney disease, then I leave that up to their kidney specialist. But for the average person, magnesium along with vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids, those are the basics. And then you add on from there. But nobody should be on calcium unregulated without the addition of magnesium along with that vitamin D. It is a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. And calcified and hardened arteries, vascular calcification, is really kind of some of the times what we find when we're dealing with erectile dysfunction, right? Those arteries are stiff, they're hard, and they can't relax enough to fill up with blood. So one of the things that you always want to do is you want to start with the pump. You want to make sure that you are getting all the nutrients that you need. You want to make sure that you're boosting nitric oxide levels. Test your nitric oxide levels. Don't be afraid to know where things stand. Nitric oxide test is really easy. You take your test strip, you take it out. You're going to look for the saliva end. It says place saliva here. Put it on your tongue for about 5 minutes, then you fold it, and you're going to fold the two sides together, and it's just that simple. And 10 seconds later, you know whether or not you are depleted with your nitric oxide levels. You match it up against the chart, and you can tell whether you're very high or whether you're very low. Nitric oxide is essential to the blood vessel dilating and expanding or contracting. So you need the nitric oxide to even be able to expand. But if those arteries are stiff and hardened, now what we need to do is try to get them unstiff. And when you look at clinical evidence of even just really knowing that someone has cardiovascular disease or stiffened arteries, there's great clinical data on stiffened arteries, whether it was because of chronic kidney disease or just cardiovascular disease, the blood vessels being diseased, being on magnesium for 3 months, 6 months at a time. And actually, there's really good data that shows that there's been a reversal. So I want it to be clear that just because you have diseased blood vessels today doesn't mean that the blood vessels have to stay that way. You can really start to heal. And I think the biggest ways to heal blood vessels is to boost nitric oxide production, but also start to decrease the calcification that's present in the arteries. And the big way is to boost magnesium intake, whether it's from adding more spinach into your diet, pumpkin seeds, that's a big one. So we got the pumpkin seeds with the magnesium, and we got pumpkin seeds with giving us what we need to help suppress prostate issues, right? So pumpkin seeds are perfect. Sprinkle some pumpkin seeds on pretty much everything that you're eating. You know, you can grind them up and put them in your smoothies. You can snack on them in the car, but pumpkin seeds will boost magnesium, and they'll also boost and help with prostate management. Or, of course, you can take a really good a magnesium supplement. And you're going to ask me, Doc, what's the best magnesium supplement? And it just really depends on the person, because the different magnesium salts that you see marketed are designed, they're either magnesium glycinate, magnesium stearate, magnesium citrate, and they're adding that extra component on there, that salt on there, so that it can actually be better absorbed. So, you know, when we're thinking about the different types of magnesium supplements, we are talking more so about, well, what are some of our goals? Is the person constipated? Does the person have a bunch of anxiety that needs to be dealt with? Does the person have heart disease? So we really base the different magnesium salts based off of what is the end game. So of course, before you take anything, you want to check in with your doctor. But I'm just going to tell you, if you have a doctor who's got you on some form of calcium and vitamin D together, you know, you need to fire the doctor. I'm sorry, you just do. Let's just face it. Some doctors are better than others, and that would be a dud doctor. And I'll challenge any doctor that tells me otherwise, okay? So really, honestly, check your labels, know what you're taking, and know what you're taking it for, because you don't want your supplements to actually, you know, that are designed to help you be part of the reason that you're not feeling great. Okay? So great. Awesome.